Kate, I'm very confused. 6 months ago, OpenAI launched Sora. I saw the news, Hollywood studios, Disney, Marvel freaking out. I saw LinkedIn influencers saying animation is over. This is the future of everything. And what happened?
Yeah, they shut it down. They agreed to shut it down on April 26th, 2026, 6 months after it launched.
Why?
Maybe come up with a number of different reasons, but clearly it was not the best strategy for them. Clearly it was not the path forward. And it was surprising for a lot of people because they had like a deal with Disney. They had a lot of people who were getting very worked up about it because of the IP infringements, right? And yeah, I don't know, for various reasons, it's over.
So we had $1 billion equity investment. We had some Altman screaming from the ceilings that he doesn't care how much they were blowing up on money on AGI.
Yep.
And then we have this tool that is super expensive. It does seem to me, without getting too scientific on the definition, that OpenAI is just throwing at the wall and seeing what sticks.
This is one way of how it looks.
But before we go through all that, I want to establish what Sora, right? What it was, what was the pitch. And Sora was designed to be this app that was AI-first animation, sort of like a TikTok vertical video feed where users could scroll AI-generated content, right? Create their own content, use their face so they can have their own stories. Again, it was a flagship feature that would, again, let people scan their faces, insert realistic versions, use other characters like I think Jake Paul, Sam Altman. The idea was you're not watching content, you're in it, which if we saw all the folks talking about entertainment, that was the future of entertainment. No longer passively consuming, we're now the entertaining, we're in charge of our stories, right? Hit the App Store, #1. Everybody's trying to get there. Super popular app. And then in November, it picked and it started going down. This buzz evaporated, but there was one thing left, which was it was infected. There's no other word to say it. Infected with deepfakes. So you had no audience, but you had a lot of possible issues with this app. So I want to go into how this all comes together to finish Sora. Yeah. So we got all this viral buzz, and then out of the blue, it evaporated, right? So I ask myself, you spend a lot of money on hype. You put together this app. Was it entertainment the end goal for this? Was it data collection? So if you can give me a little bit more information or your insights on what's the thing that finished Sora.
I think there's a number of things that are business critical that made OpenAI sort of turn its focus away from social media. I mean, first and foremost, they're not a social media company. There are whole companies that are social media companies. They are not. They're an AI lab. So that's, evidence number one. Evidence number two is compute. Creating video uses a lot of compute power because, as you know, video is a very rich sort of asset, right? It has a lot of images inside of it. And they have actually announced limits on video generation because of the shortened chip supply. There's a shortage of chips sort of everywhere across the whole AI marketplace. And I think that, compute is very expensive. They were spending $5 billion a year just for that compute power to run this app. Well, they weren't making any money to offset that cost.
So we know they're using a lot of compute power here. I remember the head of Sora saying, literally GPUs are melting. You're spending $5 billion. If you remember, we said each time anyone generated a video in Sora, that was costing OpenAI $5, which quickly adds up. So we got, first of all, they're spending a lot of money. And then we had the legal liability, right? We're talking about deepfakes and all of that. So what can we say about that?
Yeah, so it was supposed to be that people needed to opt in to use their likeness to create videos. Sam Altman himself famously put himself in there, and most of what people generated in the first few weeks was Sam Altman doing lots of kooky things. But that isn't really what happened, and I don't think you can control that as well as they thought. So you had lots of public figures who hadn't opted in, who were being used to create video content, doing God knows what. And, they were unhappy. I think Bryan Cranston is one of the ones that we read about who partnered with SAG-AFTRA to sort of really address this problem because it's honestly not fair.
Yeah, and eventually they were thanking OpenAI for dealing with this. But let's remember, when Sora came out, folks were creating deepfakes with Martin Luther King, Mr. Rogers. Like they were, messing with Mr. Rogers, the most wholesome guy, saying an amount of ungodly things.
And Cameo was suing them, which makes perfect sense because I've used Cameo before to send my friends an actual message from an actual human being, like saying happy birthday or, congratulations on your new baby or whatever. They sued them because they completely uprooted their entire market.
Sora had an actual section called Cameo. So Cameo had a lot of reasons to sue. They actually won the lawsuit. So Kate, we said we had this compute problem. They're spending $5 billion just to keep the lights on, right? And then they're getting sued left and right because of deepfakes, because of all the awful things that folks are doing with Sora. But then I'm like, well, maybe they're making at least not all of it, but some money to hopefully keep the thing running. So what happened with the revenue? Did it make anything?
No. $2.1 million, which is a fraction of what they spent on it.
And now they're going for an IPO, right? First of all, let's explain what's an IPO for those that are not familiar. When a company says we're going for an IPO, what does it mean?
It means that they are putting themselves up for public offering, which means that they are turning themselves from a private company into a public one where you can buy stocks. And in order to do that, you really have to get your house in order, right? You have to have a very clear balance sheet. You have to have a very clear statement of what you do as a company. And I think, and we've talked about this in prior episodes, OpenAI had been running in multiple directions. They sort of had this chaotic business strategy, and they needed to pare back and show that they had a really smart strategy moving forward in order to make this IPO go through.
And I want to go with the clean house, right? Because when you go to an IPO, you're going to have investors asking questions. You're going to have accountability, right? Like you cannot have a lack of candor, like some Altman has been accused in the past. So you got to really get your stuff together, right? And one of the things they did beyond shutting down Sora, which again, if you're spending $5 billion and making $2 million, you don't have to be a Warren Buffett to figure out that's not working. But also, I don't know if you remember at one point they were talking about the adult chat in ChatGPT.
Oh, right.
That's gone too.
Gone too.
Gone.
You have to, be clear about where the boundaries are in terms of what audience your company serves. So if you have kids on one app and then you have adult services in another space, it's very convoluted, and they needed to clear a path for themselves in order to make this IPO go through.
Everything for everyone doesn't work. But we're talking a lot about OpenAI, and something you said in the beginning was you mentioned this $1 billion deal with Disney. So it seems to me like we're very focused on OpenAI, but is Disney just no fault, no blame in this? What's the role in this deal gone wrong on the Sora debacle?
I don't think that Disney is to blame. So basically, let's backtrack. Disney entered a deal with OpenAI to put their IP, their characters into the platform with significant safeguards so that you can't have Mickey Mouse doing things that are inappropriate. But, as a way to bring their IP to life, which is something that they do in their parks, but have never really kind of figured out how to do in digital. So they've always been looking for this channel to activate digital, and it sort of hasn't happened. So OpenAI was one of two deals that were on the table when the incoming new CEO, Josh D'Amaro, took office. And what I think is, very ironic about his new tenure is that within 2 weeks of being in office, this entire thing collapsed, and OpenAI, announced that they were closed when they were shuttering the Sora app. So the deal went away. Now, no money had exchanged hands yet, so no harm, no foul. And I don't think that really they've lost much, because that was going to be a complicated situation to establish, I think.
I was kind of confused about the deal because Disney has been such a litigious company, right? Which you can say, okay, that's why they're going to Sora, to have control. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be a way of circumvent these guardrails and make the most awful stuff. I was always very confused about the deal and what was Disney really thinking, because it definitely seems out of character for the company, what they did. And I'm still very confused about why they went into that deal.
Well, I think they're trying to get ahead of things. But in fact, the insider tip is that DeMauro was never really a big fan of this OpenAI deal himself. In fact, probably my guess is that he had some of the same concerns that you do, Juan, about how, people could subvert this access to their IP and do bad things with it. I mean, you're Disney, you're a very established company, right? OpenAI is kind of like a new company that's kind of all over the place at like any given time.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not a good fit in terms of corporate partnership either. I don't know. So it doesn't surprise me that it fell off.
And you say all over the place, right? And OpenAI's CEO of applications, Fidji, Simo, she told employees to stop being distracted by side quests, because obviously it was the employee's fault, and to orient aggressively toward coding and business users. So kind of like pulling an Anthropic. So it feels like a confession, right? It seems to me that while they're talking about distractions, the distraction was not Sora. I think the whole strategy was distracted.
Well, I think we have to pat ourselves on the back for this one in our matching black t-shirts, because we called this months ago in a previous episode.
Are pointing towards government contracts as the only way to make that money back.
OpenAI was in this situation where they had all this capital, right? And some of the most brilliant minds in tech, and they were throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what would stick. I mean, really, like, there's nothing else that you could say. They built a social media app. They built a adult chat platform. They're working on devices that sit on your desk and are ways that you can interact from the physical world with your AI. I mean, they really were kind of running in a million directions, and we called it. But now they have to pare back, as we said, and side quests is the way that they have branded that. The real side quest was never Sora, right? It was the entire strategy. So you had social media, it's an advertising business. OpenAI is a software business. They never had an ad model to make any of this come true. And in fact, in the advertising space, some of the work that they've been doing on advertising for advertising clients is also not doing very well. We can do another whole episode on that. They don't have an advertising business currently. And, the companies who have figured most of this out earlier are really moving forward. OpenAI got lapped, I think, a little bit, and they're going to need to play catch up. And the way that they're playing catch up is by narrowing their focus and focusing on delivering product to customers, and specifically business customers.
Sam, had you been watching Slop World, you could have saved so much money, my dude. I think as a conclusion here, Sora was the wrong product for the wrong customer. If you're intending to make money, if you want to go beyond the headlines, which seems what was OpenAI's focus for the last ever, versus other companies that maybe were focusing on what actually makes money. The target was never these downloads for Sora. It's contracts, it's the boss, it's calling the attention of one person, an orange person maybe, and getting that sweet government cheese, right? And I think that also aligns with the whole Anthropic and the Pentagon thing. I think the only way that OpenAI can survive is if they get this government deals. There's no other way for the company to remain alive beyond the IPO. What?
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think one other thing that occurs to me is, like, if you're like, yay, the Sora app's going away, and now my feed won't be, littered with AI slop content, don't get too excited. Because just because their social media platform is going away does not mean that the Sora video creation tools and capabilities are going away. There will continue to be slop in your feed for the foreseeable future. This has no impact on that.
I think the main conclusion we can have, Kate, is that next time you see a splashy, fancy AI product launch announcement and you hear all these people saying how this tool is going to end a certain industry, take a bit, pause, don't let the FOMO, and ask yourself who this announcement is actually for. Is it for the press? Is it for investors? Because the truth, and what we've seen so far, is that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And speaking of smoke and mirrors, we got an episode that dives into why companies are blaming AI for layoffs and why that is misleading. So folks, click up here somewhere because you have that episode. And yeah, we want to hear your thoughts in the comments about what you think about OpenAI's future and whether we'll still talk about OpenAI 2 years from now.